في عقد الأشعري وفقه مالك وفي طريقة الجنيد السالك.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي. وبعده نستمر إن شاء الله. We move forward with the next section, which is on the pillar of Hajj. And Hajj itself is unique among the pillars of Islam, as it combines both physical, ibadah, badaniya, and financial, ibadah, maliyah, in terms of forms of worship. And this combination reflects its profound spiritual significance and the wisdom in its position as the final pillar of Islam. The author, rahimahullah, truly took the individual through all 5 pillars, from the shahada to salah to zakah to sawm, and now to hajjul bayt. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حُجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. And due to Allah from the people is a pilgrimage to the house for whoever is able to find a way there. And we will get to that inshaAllah ta'ala. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ فَرَضَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْحَجِّ فَحُجُّوا. Indeed, Allah has enjoined Hajj upon you, so perform Hajj. And the consensus or the ijma' of the ulama of the ummah is that Hajj is an obligatory pillar of Islam, making it a definitive duty in Islam, and every Muslim owes Hajj. Now there are shurut, and we'll get to those of bi'idhnillah ta'ala, and istithna'at, meaning exceptions, and we'll get to those in a moment. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he spoke on the virtues of Hajj. He said, "Man hajja hadha al-bayt," he said, "Man hajja hadha al-bayt, falam yarfuth, walam yafsuq, raja'a kama waladatu ummuh." Whoever performs Hajj to this house and does not engage in obscenity or sin will return free of sin as the day his mother gave birth to him. And this is the Hajj mabrur. This is the accepted Hajj that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of these people. And so, Sayyidina al-Imām Ibn Ashir, rahimahullah, says, hold up here, I gotta make this font bigger. Oh, 1 minute. What happened to this page? There we go. Okay. الحج فرض مرة في العمر أركانه إن تركت لم تجبري. Hajj is an obligation once in a lifetime. Its pillars, if omitted, cannot be compensated for. He says, الإحرام والسعي وقوف عرفة ليلة الأضحى والطواف. Ihram, sa'i, and standing at Arafah, the night of sacrifice, meaning Laylat al-Adha, and tawaf follow it. So understanding first that is upon us is the types of ihram and the pillars of Hajj. Awalan, before we get to that specific point, we must know that there are specific conditions of Hajj itself. Number 1, it's obligatory upon every Muslim that is mukallaf. Hajj by a child is a nafila, and it does not relieve them of the obligation of Hajj in their adulthood. The second is that they are free. Hajj is not obligated on a slave. And 3, مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا, meaning the one who is capable of doing Hajj, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the famous hadith Jibreel. Meaning that one has the health, meaning the physical strength to reach Mecca without falling ill or having any of those matters affect them or harm them. Number 2, financial integrity, meaning that they're able to afford the journey of Hajj, because Hajj is a very expensive journey. It not only requires for you to be able to pay for the journey itself, but also for you to be able to pay for your bills and a number of other expenses that might be outside of Hajj, including including but not like um, it would include, for example, like the hotel, clothing, possibly food and drink, other matters or essentials that we would call it for Hajj itself. And finally, that it is possible to perform the obligatory salah with all its fard elements while traveling. Meaning that we also have to ensure that the path of travel, number one, the path of travel is safe for one to be able to do. And number two, it doesn't necessarily contradict any responsibilities that we have. And truly, during these periods of time, like this period of time, we want to be able to have access to Mecca. So let's backtrack a little bit. Okay, number one, person has to be mukallaf. Number two, not a slave. Number three, that they have to have access to Mecca. What does it mean access to Mecca? Meaning one's physical, financial, or ability to pray the fard prayers is not hindered upon their entrance or their staying in Mecca itself. Performing an additional Hajj after the obligatory Hajj is considered mandub. Therefore, we divide the pillars or the rulings in regards to Hajj into three. We have pillars, then we have obligations, and then we have sunnahs of Hajj. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to go through all of them, idhna ta'ala. طيب. أولا, the pillars of Hajj. We begin with the ihram, which is the state of ritual sanctity required to perform Hajj itself. The definition is that the pilgrim intends only for Hajj. After completing Hajj, it is recommended to perform Umrah, but it is not obligatory to combine Hajj with Umrah, nor it's not obligatory to combine Hajj with Umrah, so one should not feel that they have to kind of like immediately intend it upon arrival. The second is Ifrad does not require performing Umrah. So let me backtrack a little bit here. I actually skipped ahead in the notes. The types of ihram, we either have ifrad, al-qiran, or tamattu. In terms of al-ifrad, this is when the pilgrim only intends Hajj. If they only intend Hajj, after completing Hajj, it's recommended to do. If they do Umrah, it's not an obligation that they do Umrah right after Hajj, but they're recommended to do so. Ifrad itself does not require performing Umrah either before or after Hajj, and this is going to be distinct from the other types of ihram that we're going to explain. The second is al-qiran. Well, qiran is the pilgrim combines the intention for both Hajj and Umrah, and this can be done by declaring both at the beginning or by intending Umrah first and adding Hajj before completing the Umrah. Therefore, the pilgrim performs, in terms of rituals, tawaf and sa'i both for Hajj and Umrah together. In terms of the sacrifice, a sacrificial animal, meaning a hadi, is obligatory for those who are non-Meccans, and those residing in Mecca or nearby are exempt from this requirement. The last type of ihram is at-tamattu. At-tamattu is when the pilgrim performs Umrah during the months of Hajj, then exits ihram and remains in Mecca until entering ihram again for Hajj. This allows for the pilgrim to enjoy the concession of avoiding a separate journey for Hajj. Helps them combine it, right? They don't have to go back home. They can stay. For example, some people they might want they'll come in like Ramadan. They'll stay from Ramadan all the way until Hajj, between the two Eids, and they'll do this, right? So we have three types. We have al-ifrad, wal-qiran, wal-tamattu. In terms of at-tamattu, the ruling on sacrifice is similar to al-qiran, meaning hadi is obligatory for those who are non-Meccans. If you are unable to afford it, the pilgrim fasts 3 days during Hajj and 7 days upon returning home. وَسَبْعَةٌ إِذَا رَجَعْتُمْ, as Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran. And in terms of modern times, tamattu itself is considered easier where travel schedules often limit flexibility. And so somebody might actually want to be able to benefit because it's so expensive to travel there in the first place and time consuming and so on. They might be able to benefit by coming a few days before Dhul Hijjah or before the beginning of Hajj, before the days of Hajj, and they want to do a Umrah, and then they'll go to Hajj itself, and they'll go to Mecca and begin the rites of Hajj. So we said the first pillar of Hajj, the arkan of Hajj, is al-Ihram. Al-Ihram is the intention to enter into the sacred rites of either Hajj, Umrah, or both. It's very interesting because when we're talking about Umrah, Umrah is essentially. Assalamu alaikum. Is the audio still bad? My apologies. I'm not able to hear myself. So I want to make sure we can improve the audio, or try to at least. Let me see what's going on. Bismillah. Is the audio still an issue? Assalamu alaikum. Is the audio still an issue? All right, I'm going to backtrack a little bit to make sure that I'm going to backtrack just a bit because I don't want to missing out on the Jazakumullah khairan. Let's back up a little bit, inshallah, and I'll just go over um, the first pillar. طيب. We said that Hajj itself consists of pillars, obligations, and sunnahs. As it consists of pillars and obligations and sunnahs, we begin by studying the pillars. Hajj and Umrah share some of the pillars, and they differ in some other things. So as we go through the Hajj lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to point out some things about Umrah. At the end, the author does include some mentioning of Umrah, so we'll allude to that bi'idhnillah ta'ala. And if it's not sufficient enough, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we can have a specific section for Umrah. We're working on a booklet at the moment on the rulings of Umrah and just a simplified guide. Bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we go through the process of getting it published so that people can benefit bi'idhnillah. طيب. And study from it and so on. طيب. The first pillar is al-Ihram. Al-Ihram is the state of ritual sanctity that is required to perform Hajj or Umrah. It can be undertaken in one of three ways. And this is specific for what? For when we're talking about Hajj. In terms of Umrah, if you just come in the middle of the year, you have the intention of Umrah, khalas. But because you may have Umrah that is tied to Hajj, there are different types of Ihram that we have to be aware of. You can either, number one, is called al-Ifrad. Al-Ifrad meaning fard, meaning once, a singular purpose. In this case, you're just coming to do Hajj. The pilgrim intends only Hajj. After completing Hajj, it's recommended or sunnah to perform Umrah, but it is not obligatory to combine Hajj with Umrah. Ifrad itself does not require performing Umrah either before or after Hajj, but if you happen to do so, you happen to do so. You would simply just redo your Ihram, meaning you would restart the Ihram and begin the Umrah as a separate act of worship. Okay? The second is al-Qiran. In this case, the pilgrim combines the intention for both Hajj and Umrah. And this can be done by declaring both at the beginning or by intending Umrah first and adding Hajj before completing the Umrah. The pilgrim performs Tawaf and Sa'i for both Hajj and Umrah together. In terms of a sacrifice, the sacrificial animal or the hadi is obligatory for those who are not from Mecca. Those residing within Mecca or nearby are exempt. The third type is at-tamattu. The pilgrim performs Umrah during the months of Hajj then exits ihram, remains in Mecca until entering ihram again for Hajj. Meaning, like for example, you came maybe a couple of days before Hajj, 3 or 4 days before Hajj. You did Umrah, and you said, you know what, I want to stay for Hajj. Right? I want to be able to not just do Umrah, I want to do Hajj too. So before you start, you have the intention of doing what? You have the intention of doing Umrah and Hajj at a later date. And you're going to do Umrah first, exit your Ihram, then remain in Mecca. You stay in Mecca for a period of time until Hajj begins, and you do your Hajj, and then you go home. Ma'as-salam. Okay, this is allowed. This is called a tamattu. And this allows the pilgrim to enjoy the concession of avoiding a separate journey for Hajj. And most of the travel groups today, they do tamattu, where they do a Umrah and then they do a Hajj, or they do a Hajj and then they do a Umrah after, which is not an issue. But specifically in the case of doing a Umrah before Hajj, meaning you do Umrah, you wait for a period of time, then you do Hajj, right? And you stay in Mecca. If you do such a thing, similar to Qiran, Hadi is obligatory for non-Meccans. If you're unable to afford it, the pilgrim, they fast 3 days during Hajj and 7 upon returning home. In terms of the pillars of Hajj, there are 4. Al-Ihram, wal-Sa'i, wal-Wuquf bi-Arafah, wa Tawaf al-Ifada. In terms of Al-Ihram, it is the intention to enter into the sacred rites of either Hajj or Umrah. In Salah, we have something called Takbirat al-Ihram, and this is how we begin the prayer. We say Allahu Akbar. Once you say Allahu Akbar, what was previously halal to you has now become haram to you, within the sense of anything that because you are in a state of worship, anything that contradicts that state of worship takes you out of that state of ihram. So technically speaking, in salah, you are in a state of ihram, you are in a state of prayer. So if you move outside of that, right? If you speak, if you laugh, if you turn your back to the prayer, all of these things may break your prayer, right? They will break your prayer. Or if you intentionally leave that, they will break your prayer. Likewise, in Hajj, we have specific acts that will break the state of Ihram and break this pillar of Hajj, which we'll get to. They're called Mubtilat al-Hajj. We'll get to it, bi'idhnillah. So therefore, when one enters into the state of Ihram, their intention, as we spoke previously, can be 3. Either they're doing it mufrad or mutamatta or qareen. Okay, they're doing one of those 3. Either they're combining Hajj and Umrah together, and that's qareen, or they're doing tamattu, which is Umrah followed by Hajj, or they're doing Hajj alone. And each of them has their rulings in terms of the hadi that is given at the end. Right? We said hadi is owed for tamattu and qareen, but not for Hajj alone. We'll continue bi'idhnillah ta'ala. The next is as-sa'i, which is a ritual walking between the hills of Safa and Marwa. And the condition for as-sa'i is that it must follow the tawaf that comes before it. We'll get to that bi'idhnillah. Number 3 is standing al-wuqufu bi-Arafah, is the presence at the plain of Arafah during part of the night of Eid al-Adha. This is in terms of the daytime wajib, in terms of the daytime standing, this is a wajib act and can be compensated with a sacrificial offering if it was missed, with a hadi if it was missed. The next, or kafara, we'll get to it inshallah. The next is tawaf al-ifada. And we said that tawaf al-ifada is doing tawaf, meaning the English word escapes me. I think it's circumambulation. I don't know the word. I forget it. Just it's walking around the Kaaba, going around the Kaaba, right? 7 times and so on. Circulating the Kaaba, performed on the day of sacrifice, Yawm and Nahr. The other tawaf acts are not considered pillars, but obligations or recommended acts, and we'll get to those inshallah. We're only looking at the pillars of Hajj at the moment. Then the author, he says, al-ihram was-sa'yu wuqufu Arafah laylat al-adha wa tawaf radifah. We said these as well. Let's move into the types of Um, before we leave this particular section, let's actually just mention the sacrificial slaughtering because it's important for us as we get into the obligatory sections, which we'll cover in a moment, inshallah. But in terms of the sacrificial slaughterings, any non-performance of obligatory elements of the Hajj which are not pillars, they can be mended by sacrificial offerings, or we call this a hadi. The meat is distributed to the poor and comprises of three types of animals. The most preferable being a camel, the second being a cow, and the third being a sheep or goat. In terms of in terms of women and the obligation for women to Hajj, this is a specific mas'ala on its own. Women must have a mahram to accompany them. If no mahram is available, there are opinions that allow for her to travel with a trustworthy group for the obligatory Hajj. In terms of a voluntary Hajj, a mahram or husband is required without exception. Right? Why is that the case? Because the first one that we mentioned, the first Hajj is obligatory. So it may be possible for her to travel with the group so long as it's a trustworthy group. This typically is like your masjid group that goes for Hajj or something of the like, and they have like an imam with them and a couple of sisters who are pious and so on, and it's a group and people are they have like the women boarding together and the men boarding in another room and all of these things that are taken into account. In terms of the sunnah Hajj meaning a second Hajj because it's not a requirement, and then we will remove the rukhsa of having because it's a rukhsa essentially of her being able to go with a group. طيب. Another question: is Hajj valid for a kafir, somebody who's a disbeliever, and they go and they do Hajj? They thought it would be a Instagram moment. They wanted to live stream it. They wanted to put it on TikTok. They said, this year I wanted to go for Hajj and I wanted to get the vibes of Islam. Is that allowed? Hajj is only valid for Muslims, and this actually is applies to all acts of worship in Islam. As non-Muslims are not obligated, or we should say that there's a difference of opinion on the obligation, but in terms of its validity, it's only valid for Muslims. طيب. Now let's dive into. Does anybody have any questions in terms of the pillars for Hajj? طيب. Let's move into the next section بإذن الله تعالى, which is the obligation or the obligatory elements of Hajj. He says, among them are acts whose deficiencies is compensated for by sacrifice, and we mentioned this, and obligations, unlike the pillars, are rectified with the sacrifice. قال قد جبرت منها طواف من قدم والواجبات غير الأركان بدم. آه، وركعة الطواف إن إن تحتم ووصله بالسعي مشي مشي فيهما. Jeez, this مشي. Why is it the تشكيل is wrong in the script? I need a better print of Ibn Ashir on my Google Doc here. Bismillah. طيب. Before we dive into that, the obligatory elements of Hajj. What are the obligations of Hajj? We did the pillars and now we move into the obligations. The obligations of Hajj are 11. Number one is going around the Kaaba on arrival. This is called Tawaf al-Qudum. The next is immediate performance of Sa'i thereafter. After you do the Tawaf and you enter the masjid, you go and you do Sa'i. But if these two are left out because of forgetfulness or because one fears one will not make it to Arafah on time, there's no Hadi that is required. Number three is doing sa'i and tawaf on foot if able. Number 4 is doing 2 rak'ahs after any tawaf that is obligatory or a pillar. If one abandons these two and gets to Mecca, one must sacrifice an animal. Number 5 is stopping over at Muzdalifah after returning from Arafah. Staying until Fajr is sunnah. And this actually is beneficial for the Mālikīyyah because they're able to kind of get around, until they're able to get around a lot of the traffic that is in um, that is in the area at that period of time, as the area of Muzdalifah gets very, very full of people. Number 6 is spending 3 nights after Arafah. Number 7 is intending the state of Ihram when you pass by any of the miqat points. And this can also be by air, land, or sea. And the designated entry points are of 2 kinds. They are either related to space, this is called miqat al-makani, which are of 2 kinds themselves. The traveler intending Mecca has the following miqat. Number 1 is Dhul Hulayfa if they're coming from the direction of Medina, meaning north. Al-Juhfa if they're coming from the direction of Egypt, or Asham, meaning Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, and Jordan. Al-Qarn if they're coming from the direction of Najd, meaning east. Dhatul Irq if coming from the direction of Iraq, northeast. And Yalamlam is coming from the direction of Yemen, meaning south. For the permanent or temporary resident of Mecca, it is mandub that he intends ihram from Masjid al-Haram. For the temporary resident only, it is mustahab to go out to his miqat if there is time. Entry points that are related to time is the second type of miqat. We call this miqat al-zamani. The first of Shawwal to Fajr of the day of Eid for Hajj is the miqat al-zamani for Hajj itself. For Umrah, miqat al-zamani is all throughout the year. There's no time specific. Umrah can be done during Hajj, it can be done after Hajj, before Hajj, all the time. Any point in time. Therefore, we say the first of Shawwal to Fajr of the day of Eid is the miqat al-zamani for Hajj. Why do we say the first of Shawwal and it's not in Dhul Hijjah? Because somebody might have as we mentioned before, they might have the intention of a tamattu', meaning that they're staying there from the first of Shawwal and they wait from the first of Shawwal all the way until the days of Hajj itself. Number 8, it is that men are not. It is for men to not wear sewn clothes or sewn footgear beyond the miqat. Men wear slippers and 2 white cotton sheets. And toweling itself is probably better against heat and cold. And women wear their normal clothes. Women wear their normal clothes, meaning they can wear abaya and hijab, and just observe the limits of modesty. That's it. We'll talk about the ihram wear in a moment, inshallah. Number 9 is saying the talbiyah, meaning moderately loud for men and quietly for women, which is labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, innal hamda wan ni'mata laka wal mulk la sharika lak. And number 10 is shaving or cutting one's hair after throwing stones at the largest of the monoliths there at Rami al-Jamarat, the first time at Mina. And number 11 is throwing stones at the monoliths on the day of Mina itself. So to summarize, the obligations are 11. Tawaf al-Qudum, then the performance of sa'i right after Tawaf al-Qudum, because sa'i, the requirement for sa'i is that, for its validity, is that right before it is Tawaf al-Qudum. Meaning you have to do tawaf right before you do sa'i. Even for Umrah, it's the same thing. You have to do tawaf before you do sa'i. Number 3 is to do both of those on foot if you are able. Number 4 is to do 2 rak'at after any tawaf that you make. And that is any tawaf that is obligatory that you make. And if you abandon the 2 rak'at after during Hajj, then you owe a hadi afterwards. Okay, and meaning you get far from Mecca and then you owe a hadi. Number 5 is stopping at Muzdalifah after returning from Arafah. Number 6 is spending 3 nights at Arafah, in Arafah at Mina, or after Arafah in Mina. Number 7 is intending the state of ihram when passing over any miqat point, and we said miqats are of 2 types, makani wa zamani, meaning that miqat is either the specific entry point into the area of the haram, or we're going to say zamani in the sense that it is from the 1st of Shawwal until what? We said from the 1st of Shawwal all the way until the day of Eid for Hajj. And for Umrah, it's the whole year. Number 8 is to observe all ihram rules, because what comes after it is ihram related, meaning that the men they're not allowed to wear any stone clothing. They wear 2 cloths, one to cover their waist and one to cover their shoulders. The ihram for men, for the Malikis, is not actually to wrap it under the arms. It's to go over the shoulders only, and to kind of leave the middle area, middle area unwrapped, right? Like where your stomach is and where your chest is. You don't wrap that part. You just put the ihram over your shoulders. If you are going to be putting on anything that is like a money belt or a bag, it cannot be something that is holding up your clothes. So if the money belt, for example, can't be holding up the waistband for the ihram. Uh, Bag, if you have a little bag that carries your items, you can have that, but that little bag cannot have, for example, a mobile shade. That would invalidate the ihram. Cannot be taking a mobile shade with you. If you want to carry with you essentials like water or medicine or identification or money that it is absolutely essential for it to be on you, you can do so, right? You can have a bag, but that bag cannot be holding up the top part of your ihram or the bottom part of your ihram. That's all. We'll talk about those bi'idhnillah ta'ala in the future. We also said for number 9, which is saying the talbiyah, meaning labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Number 10 is shaving or cutting one's hair after throwing the stones at the first time in al-Mina. Number 11 is to throw stones on the days of Mina. And bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we'll cover, inshallah, the steps of Hajj. But before we do that, I want to see if there's any questions. I feel like we go really quickly through these things, and I just want to make sure that we're not skipping over anything. بإذن الله. طيب. Yes. Sorry, just looking at the notes here. For those on modern transport, so for example, if you're on a plane and you go over the miqat without stopping, or you're on a train and you pass the miqat without stopping, you must enter ihram while you're still in the air or while you're still in that vehicle. If you deliberately pass the miqat without entering ihram, it necessitates them, or it necessitates sacrificing a compensatory animal. Yeah, Latif. I cannot speak English. But this is the reality. So we often see people, they go over the miqat, they don't change. One of the recommendations is to get into your ihram. Like, let's say you have a layover in Istanbul, or you have a layover in Egypt, in Cairo, and you're coming from the west, right? Particularly for America, there usually is a layover. For some of the pilgrims, they will go direct to Jeddah, or they'll go direct to Medina, and then they'll immediately go to their final destination, which is Mecca. But realistically speaking, because of the time constraints that could possibly happen when you're at a layover, because the next flight is about an hour or 2 hours, and you might have difficulty with the whole plane trying to get changed into ihram and trying to get into a state of ihram at that particular time. It's best that you come before you even get on the plane, changed, and you've done your ghusl, and you've cleaned and washed and trimmed the hair and cleaned yourself up. That way, once you've entered into the plane, you're already in a state of ihram, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, all the way until you get to Mecca. And this is yani, this typically is the recommendation for most people. طيب, we now move in to what this actually looks like. Now we're going to be describing Hajj. In terms of Hajj, the first step is assuming ihram. We assume ihram when we reach the miqat. Okay? But we also mention that it can be beforehand. There's no places prior. The Saudi government also organized at these miqat points a place for people to change and to get adjusted and so on, so that way they can dress and immediately go into their state of ihram for it to be practical. And there's even a masjid there to offer the 2 rak'ats after ihram. So when one reaches the miqat point, this begins the ihram, technically speaking, when one puts into practice all of the elements of the fitrah. That's number two, meaning that you begin to shave the pubic hair, you remove hair under the armpits, you trim the mustache, and you clip the nails. You perform a ghusl. If you are in janaba, you must intend to lift this condition simultaneously. So let's say you were in a state of janaba, and then then you're going to start ihram, so you also intend to remove the janaba and to do ghusl for ihram. Number four, you put on the clothing of ihram, and this consists of an izar, meaning like the waistcloth, and a shawl or a rida, and you may have a pair of sandals that are known as an-na'layn. In Arabic, it's called na'layn. Number five, the sandals should be something that is not stitched. They should be like a very simple sandal. The best is to be barefoot, obviously, but for obvious reasons, right? Being that people are traversing a long distance, and everybody has different health conditions, and the feet might not be able to walk across hot surfaces and dirtier surfaces and roads and different areas. The best is to have sandals at this point in time, right? And it's the best for it not to be stitched, to be kind of like one layer, or one material, similar to like a plastic sandal, that has some, at least some support for your feet. That way you're not getting harmed while walking, but at the same time, there isn't any damage to your there isn't any reduction to the state of ihram due to the type of sandal that you're wearing. There's a lot of modern sandals that people can wear, but the feet must not be totally covered so it looks like a shoe. It should be a sandal, right? If somebody sees it, it should look like a sandal. Some people that they wear like the full closed Crocs, and that's not acceptable. It should be a sandal. Should be a sandal. When I went over this mas'ala with Shaykh Maḥmoud, he told me it should be a sandal. Oftentimes people that they're wearing like a Croc, and it covers their feet. I don't know if you guys know what Crocs are, but it's like the type of sandal where it looks almost like a shoe, but the back of it is removed. Technically speaking, this still is a shoe by our standards. So we would consider a sandal to be something that is open-toed, that has an open top, that has like two straps on the top of it, two or one strap, right, on the top of it. Number five is bringing a sacrificial animal if one has one, and if it is possible to do so. A lot of people are able to do this, right? So and it's not a requirement. It's not from the obligations that we mentioned. Number six, pray 2 rak'at. Actually, back in the day, they would do this. Why? Because before there weren't hotels and five-star buffets. Now you go to Hajj, and it's a whole different experience. Before, it was a very spiritual experience. There was a lot of tawadu that one had to have, uh, and you were separated from your suburban life, or from your city life, or whatever life that you led previously to getting to Mecca. Once you got to Mecca, it's kind of like camping. You have your supplies, and you kind of have to survive for a period of time, right? And people would feed others, and there were groups that would bring animals with them, and produce, or whatever they needed in terms of feeding the groups. And there were traders that would come into Mecca from Mecca itself and from outside, and they would sell food that was necessary for people to be able to eat and drink while staying in Mecca itself. But yes, it was kind of like camping if you think about it. The next matter is that you pray 2 rak'ats after putting on your ihram, and cleaning yourself off and so on. Then during the 2 rak'at you recite Surah al-Kafirun and al-Ikhlas after al-Fatiha. First rak'ah al-Kafirun, and the second rak'ah al-Ikhlas. If you are traveling over land, one would mount their vehicle or beast, and they would then make the intent to enter ihram for Hajj, immediately setting off from the miqat and uttering the talbiyah, la labbaik Allahumma labbaik. And it should be done at a moderate volume, and it doesn't need to be continuous the entire time. It's good to stop and start. It's recommended to do it in terms of changes. For example, getting off of the animal, going up a hill, down a hill, going up the stairs, down the stairs, going into a hallway. Any area that changes and up and down and movements, that's it's recommended to do it in that period. So renewing this talbiyah is a recommendation. So they say standing up or sitting down, going up or down a hill, mounting or getting off or into a vehicle, meeting another group of hujjaj, hearing people often. When you hear people saying it, you say it. When you wake up from your sleep, for example, you may have taken a little bit of a nap. You wake up from your sleep, you do the talbiyah again, labbaik Allahumma labbaik, and immediately after performing any salah. But it's makruh to do it non-stop, because the person gets tired and exhausted, and fed up with it, and that's not the state that you want to be in. The next phase in Hajj is actually reaching Mecca. When you reach Mecca, if possible, one performs a mustahab ghusl upon entering Mecca without rubbing the skin, and uh, uh, at the Tuwa when approaching Mecca. Number 12 is entering by Quba Thaniya, and then when the boundaries of the city of Mecca are reached, the talbiyah is stopped, and all occupation with worldly affairs is left as one proceeds into Masjid al-Haram. When you see the Kaaba, you begin to make takbir. Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd. You enter into Masjid al-Haram through Bab al-Salam. This is where people enter into it, Bab al-Salam. However, due to space and constraints and different positions, people might go through another door. It's fine. Another gate. It's fine. Because Masjid al-Haram is so large, there isn't a way for everybody to enter into through one gate. If you're fortunate, you get to enter through Bab al-Salam. If not, no issues. You enter through the other gates. Um, it's also possible that when you get to Mecca, you might not be able to immediately go to Masjid al-Haram. It might be easier for you to go to your hotel first to drop off your belongings, and then move about and continue your journey, and that's allowed as well. Then you do tawaf al-qudum, where one proceeds directly to greet the black stone. Is this possible for everybody? Not necessarily. But your tawaf begins at the black stone. When you get to Masjid al-Haram, they have markers. They have like they have a green light that appears on the side, and they have a large black strip that is on the ground, so people know when to begin their tawaf. When you enter into Masjid al-Haram, tawaf is your tahiyyat al-masjid. So it combines with tawaf al-qudum. So as soon as you enter, you do your tawaf. This is the first action. So you come in, immediately go to the position of the black stone, you say the takbir, and you begin the 7 rounds of tawaf around the Kaaba. And you keep the Kaaba on your left hand side. You don't go from the right hand side. You keep it on the left hand side. It should be on your left. And you repeat the takbir. During your tawaf, you make dua, you make istighfar, you ask Allah for forgiveness and for help and assistance. You can say labbaik Allahumma labbaik, you can takbir, any dhikr is allowed. The greeting of the black stone each time as you pass is one of the recommendations. You also say the takbir at the Yemeni corner, or Yemeni corner. You touch it if it's possible, and you bring the hand to the mouth, but neither the hand nor the Yemeni corner is kissed itself. When greeting the black stone, you can either try to kiss it, and if this is impossible because of crowds, then you touch it. If that's impossible, then you bring one hand to one's mouth without actually kissing the hand. You just like that. Bas. Then you do the first 3 rounds of tawaf while trotting. This is called the ramal. And the last 4 walking. The trotting itself is only done by men. Women do not do the trotting. It's like a light jog. Light jog. Very light jog. Should be just as with a little bit of speed. But if that's not possible, then you can jog in place. And if that's not possible, then you just do your tawaf walking. Then you pray 2 rak'at behind Maqam Ibrahim without preventing people from passing in front of you. And if you cannot do the 2 rak'at behind Maqam Ibrahim, you just try to find a place as close to it as possible. And in those 2 rak'at, the first surah you recite is قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, and the second is Surah Al-Ikhlas. Then you make dua, you supplicate freely at al-Multazim area between the black stone and the door of the Kaaba. You make plenty of dua. You drink Zamzam. It's recommended to drink Zamzam and to pour it on one's head, to fatten it, one's body. Then we move into a sa'i. After you finish your dua, you drink your little bit of Zamzam. Take your time when you're there. Take your time when you're there, because the way it works is they have you working in a flow. So once you finish the tawaf, it's not necessarily you can go back. Some people are able to go back, but it's best that they want everybody to keep moving, because there's people coming in and people exiting. So it just makes sense for us to have a consistent flow. In terms of a sa'i, in terms of a sa'i, uh, in terms of a sa'i, you greet the black stone as the first sunnah. Then you go to Safa and you look towards the Kaaba and you say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar 3 times, and you say La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la lahu al-mulk wa lahu al-hamd wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, La ilaha illallah wahdahu wahdah anjaza wa'dah wa nasara 'abdah wa hazama al-ahzab wahdah. And you make dua, and then you do salah ala nabi, and then you go to Marwa. You can also recite Inna as-safa wal marwata min sha'a'irillah. And then you go to Marwa, and what is mentioned, and what we mentioned previously about Safa, you do the same thing. Then you go with haste in the section called Batn al-Masil, which is this area between Safa and Marwa where you go quickly. Currently today they have it. It's at the valley, but they have it on markers, the green light. There'll be a green light up above you, and you'll notice people just start running. And this is the same thing. You just go with haste. You don't have to sprint. You just go with a little bit of power behind your legs. You're with a group of women. The women don't run; they walk. They'll catch up to you. Don't worry. Once you finish that bit, you can wait for them if you need to. During Safa and Marwa and Tawaf, make as much dua as you can. If you need to stop during a sa'i for some water, you can. If you need to, if your legs hurt for whatever reason, you need to take a moment, you can. But you want to be able to connect these acts of worship and not have too much pause. Don't exit the area. But if you need to wait for whatever reason due to some your feet hurt, your back aches or something like of the like, then you can take a moment to pause. If there's a lot of people, be very careful. Be aware that it's not going to be a comfortable experience in Hajj due to the amount of people. So persist and continue, and then try to take a break in a place that is a little bit more safer for that. Make plenty of dua, and Allah Azza wa Jalla will answer it, inshallah, during those two pillars. In terms of tawaf and sa'i, there are some rulings that come under it, and they're divided into two categories: what is obligatory and what is sunnah. In terms of what is obligatory, the first is that the body is free of any impurity on your body, your clothing, or your place, similar to salah. Number two is being in a state of wudu. Being in a state of wudu for tawaf is obligated as well. And you may do tayammum if it's necessary. Number three, covering the awrah. The awrah should be covered the entire time you're doing tawaf and sa'i. Performing 7 circulations around, during, naam, performing seven turns around the Kaaba. I think it's called circumambulations, but I can't. This is a weird word. I don't know how it's pronounced. So I'm just a guy from Jersey. This word has too many letters in it. I know tawaf. It's very easy. Alhamdulillah. There's better languages than English, right? طيب. And then you perform them consecutively, meaning that you don't do 3 circumambulations, then you stop, then you go outside for a drink, get some ahwa, then you come back. It doesn't work that way. You perform them consecutively and inside the limits of the masjid. And outside the rim at the bottom of the Kaaba is called Shadrawan, and this is not supposed to be touched. So you're avoiding what? You're doing it inside of the Kaaba and outside of that ring called Shadrawan, and the tomb of Ismail called Hijr Ismail. So you do not want to do it in that area. You only want to do it what? Outside of the semicircle, outside of the Kaaba, circulating it. If you cross that area, that tawaf is invalidated. You have to make that specific lap up. You keep the Kaaba on your left and performing the tawaf counterclockwise. In terms of the sunnah elements for tawaf, you do it on foot if you are able. You kiss the black stone and touch the Yemeni corner at the beginning. You do dua and salah ala nabi, that's a sunnah. And men should trot in the first 3 rounds. So if we miss any of the sunnahs of tawaf, technically it's not invalidated. In terms of sa'i, we have obligations, sunnahs, and mustahab elements. For the obligatory elements of a sa'i, we do 7 laps. It's not there and back. You go from Safa, then you go to Marwa. That's 1. Then from Safa back to Marwa, then from Marwa back to Safa. That's 2. And that 7 times. You start from Safa and then you go to Marwa. And it has to be preceded from its obligations that it's preceded by a valid tawaf. The second element, which are the sunnahs, include kissing the black stone after doing 2 rak'ahs, after tawaf, at Maqam Ibrahim. So you do the 2 rak'ahs at Maqam Ibrahim or behind Maqam Ibrahim, and then you go and you kiss the black stone. Then you go to sa'i. That's the sunnah. Then climbing the hills of Safa and Marwa, and for men to hasten between the 2 hills, meaning to go quickly at the green zone and to make dua while you're doing sa'i. It's also mustahab for the body to be free of any impure elements in its body, clothing, or place, and it's mustahab to be in a state of wudu. Does it invalidate it? No. The only invalidation happens is from tawaf. Why? Because it's in place of because it's in place of salah. It's in place of salah. But it's also from its requirements. From its requirements. The next part of Hajj is waiting for Arafah. Inshallah ta'ala, what we'll do is, because I think we've reached the end of our time here, we'll pick up from this point of waiting for Arafah, and we'll continue inshallah. This will give us an opportunity, number one, for everybody, because there's a lot of content that we covered today. It's important for us to review the arkan of Hajj, the obligations of Hajj, the obligatory elements of Hajj, then what was obligatory for Tawaf, and what was obligatory for Sa'i, and the sunnahs respectively, and mustahabbat respectively. Bismillah ta'ala, what we're going to do is pick up from where we left off, go over Tawaf and Sa'i once more, so that way it's drilled into us, and then we'll go forward after that with the other elements of Hajj, which is Arafah and the days of the days of the Muzdalifah, and what happens after in terms of Yawm al-Nahar. Okay. طيب. With that being said, before we close out today, just trying to catch any questions. First one, no questions for me, alhamdulillah. Awesome. No questions, Sīdī. Barakallahu feekum. Another student asks, on wudu for the tawaf, is it difficult for someone to hold wudu for very long, especially given large tawafs? What does one do? Are they excused? You got to go make wudu again. You go back and you make a wudu. There was one guy. He insisted, a Shafi'i, very funny joke. He insisted, um, uh, because for the Shafi'iyya, touching the women breaks wudu. Touching the women breaks wudu. So he insisted to do tawaf as a Shafi'i, and he was given the recommendation to do tawaf as a Hanafi, where it wouldn't necessarily break the wudu in this case during tawaf due to the situation of tawaf itself. And for the Mālikīyyah, it's not necessarily a problem if you happen to touch a woman, because we've spoken about what breaks wudu in terms of touching of the opposite genders, if there was a moment of pleasure and so on, right? Anyways, the Shafi'i, flat out, any touching of a woman, khalas, this breaks the wudu. He's doing this tawaf. And what he planned to do was that he did it on the outskirts of the masjid, as far as possible from the Kaaba itself, so that way he didn't bump into anybody in the crowds. And mashallah, he was able to do 6 on the final tawaf. He gets to the final tawaf, and some old lady, she calls out and she says, she's like falling, something like that. She needs like some support, and she says to him, "Oh, my son," and she grabs onto him. And he breaks and from his end he breaks his wudu. He says, "You know what? Today I'm Hanaf Sha'i," meaning I'm Hanafi and Shafi'i together. Right? Poor dude, he was just like, "I can't do this anymore. A lot of time that I spent there. I'm a Hanafi after this. For the tawaf, I did it as a Hanafi. خلاص. I'm moving on." المهم, alhamdulillah, يعني when we look at the understanding of tawaf, we have to have wudu the entire time. Yes, it's from the conditions of it. It shouldn't be difficult. It should not be difficult to do that. Right? Make sure to avoid any gassy foods, I guess, and try to make wudu beforehand if you can, right? That's why it's good that before you get to the haram, you go to the hotel or you go to the restroom. There's restrooms outside. Freshen up, go and wash your face, use the restroom, make wudu, then enter. Because this is gonna help you kind of like reset. If you come off the plane and immediately go to tawaf, this is like not a good idea at all. Because you need to put your bag somewhere, and you need to put your other things somewhere else. It's gonna be a mess. So most people, what they do is they either have a bus that they go back to, or a hotel or something, of a place to put their safe belongings. Wherever that is, there should be a restroom there, or something where you can change uh, or have anything else there. If it's a difficulty, then I don't know. Find the person. But this is our opinion. خلاص. Sounds like a difficulty to go up to do wudu harder for the old person. No, nobody has any issues. I haven't heard anybody who had any issues with tawaf. And for the older person who can't use the bathroom and they're in such a bad condition to do Hajj, we just said that Hajj is excused for them. Why are they going to Hajj? For the younger person, they should be able to hold it in. Shouldn't be a problem. Once you finish tawaf, you're good. You don't need the wudu for sa'i. Maybe you need to use the bathroom, but it's not easy to access the restrooms in the Masjid al-Haram. You have to actually it's so huge. It takes like 20 minutes to go from the bathroom all the way to the Kaaba. It's a very long walk. I'm not sure if there were other bathrooms that are closer to where the tawaf area is, but from my experience when we did Umrah, it was like a 20-minute walk to go back. It was a lot of sabr that one had to have. So yeah, before you go, make sure you climb. And the best thing is before you enter into the masjid, use the bathroom, make wudu, then enter into the masjid. There's no problem with that. And typically that helps people. The tawaf does not take that long. The tawaf itself should take approximately 10 minutes. I've never heard of anybody having an issue in 10 minutes of time. So if little kids can do it in kindergarten and in school on field trips, so can you. All right. I think this is a good place for us to stop at it, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah Azza wa Jalla accept from us and forgive us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives us for any errors that we made in our lesson for today. All errors are from us and none are from Allah. We ask that Allah elevates us in knowledge and elevates us in rank in our taqwa and istiqamah, and that He accepts us from salihin wal abrar. We also ask that Allah Azza wa Jal blesses all of us with a Hajj mabrur, inshallah, and He accepts from us our Hajj. Not only does He send us on Hajj, but He accepts from us our Hajj, so that we may return without sins and blessed. May Allah Azza wa Jal give us multiple Hajjs in our lifetime, so that we may enjoy in that reward of the Sunnah. Ameen. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وإلى لقاء آخر إن شاء الله تعالى. أستودعكم الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.